Hello everyone to another episode of Skills Talks, where we interview experts on the skill-based organization, what it is, what it isn't, and what practical examples are to bring it to life at organizations. And today I'm interviewing Meredith Wellard, who was the former VP Group Talent Acquisition, Learning and Growth at DHL. During that role, she spent nearly 5 years building the foundations to become a skill-based organization. She has now left DHL and started her own company, where she supports organizations with the people and change management side of tech enablement, if I say that right.
Yeah.
Particularly around the skills topic. Meredith is a true pragmatist, as you'll find in this conversation, an Australian who lives in Bonn, and I found out we both love Morocco in the last conversation we have. Welcome to the show, Meredith.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's lovely to be invited.
Lovely to have you too. And as I did with the previous episodes as well, I'd love to start with a question from the previous guest. And I think it's a really cool one for you, because the question is from Sandra Laughlin, who at EPAM Systems has built on the years of work that they spent on fleshing out a skill-based organization. And her question was, why the skepticism around the skill-based organization?
Yeah. And it is a great question. I think actually it comes from two different places, if I'm honest. I think the first place that it comes from is actually skills are not new. I mean, I did my master's over 20 years ago, and my focal point for my master's was on the acquisition of skills or the transfer of skills from consultants and contractors in organizations. So literally, we've been talking about skills, competencies, capabilities, whatever you like, for many, many, many years. And I hear a lot from people, what's the hype now? Like, why suddenly are we interested when we were always interested in skills? So I think that's one part. And then I think the other part is the legacy mindset around skills, competencies, capabilities, whatever you want to call it, is that it's really, really hard work. And, you know, if you have to put that hard work in, and I've been involved in projects developing skills taxonomies for one function or another in organizations, and it literally used to take years to do that. And by the time you'd completed it, it was out of date. It had no value, it wasn't utilised, it was too granular, and I think that sort of legacy experience probably has run over into the world we're in today, where people are going, it doesn't work, so why are we bothering? And so I suspect those two, and maybe the other one, just as a third sort of perspective, is everything new is a change. You know, as HR practitioners, we know change, we talk about change, and many of us are indeed the champions of change. But it doesn't mean that we aren't victims of our own change reluctance, right? So it's possible that it's just a resistance to the changes that we're going through now. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe indeed. But I wonder, because you said it's a lot of work and that might be a hurdle for organization to embark upon it. Yet we hear a lot about the value, and I think you're also a big proponent of the skill-based organization as the value it can bring. So can you react to that objection of the skeptics saying, let's not start with it because it's too much work? Why is it still worth it?
Yeah. So I think when I say it's too much work, I feel like it used to be too much work. I think, you know, now that we have access to some of this amazing AI or that you know, gives us the ability to use masses of data and simplify and automate the curation and collation of that data into something meaningful. Now that we have data scientists who are absolutely brilliant at building and visualizing and analyzing data in a meaningful way, I think it's no longer the hard work in terms of actual hours of work. It is hard work in terms of the intellectual input that you have to put in. So one, because you have to learn, and you have to learn fast if you want to keep up with it. And two, because there is no, I say this frequently and I genuinely believe it, I don't believe we yet have a a dominant design, how it looks and feels and acts. If you think about, for example, talent acquisition or talent management processes, the annual cycle of performance management, for example, there is a sort of dominant design that we all then somehow copy or adjust or adapt for our own organizations. I don't think when it comes to the skills landscape, we've quite reached that yet. And therefore, it's hard. It's intellectually hard and it's a bit risky. Why do I think it's worth it? Because although we may not feel it today, hardcore, we will feel in the not too distant future the pressure of identifying alternative pathways for talent with specific skills to come into our organization. The concept of buy is going to shrink in my mind when it comes to some of these core skills. Either for many organizations it will just become financially unviable to buy skills off the market all the time, or the skills won't be available in the market as readily as it was in the past. And therefore we need to start to look at how we bring skills into our organisation in a fast, efficient and effective way in advance of the wave hitting us, not after the wave has hit it, because that's about competition, right? That's about being a competitive organisation, is having the capabilities you need to survive in a highly competitive market that is probably in the future not going to be driven by as much by, global trade economics or, I don't know, the cost of parts, but actually by the cost of the labour it needs to pull that into the market. And I think we don't quite feel it yet, which is why it's hard to sometimes have that conversation at a board level, for example. But we will feel it. And I know that for a fact because I've done quite some analytics on the external market in terms of the increasing demand for specific talent and skills against the decreasing supply of those talents and skills in different geographies, in different age cohorts, in different functional cohorts, whatever you like. But there is a decline in the supply and an increase in the demand. And whilst it hasn't crossed yet, it is not that far off. And the birth rate's not increasing fast enough in every country to address that. So it's not increasing at all, by the way. So let's be clear, we're going to face this challenge for some time.
Yeah. So it might not be an immediate problem, but it will be in the future, which is why we need to start now.
Yeah.
And I absolutely want to also put a pin for later on in how you convey that to the business, but let's talk about that later.
Yeah.
But is that a fair summary of
Fully, and I was just going to add to it, I say that it may not be a compelling argument today for all organisations, but I feel there are definitely verticals out there that are facing it already, that are already realising we're too slow, we've fallen behind the wave, because, what learning's like, that the acquisition of skills is not something you just flick a switch and there you go, everyone's got it. It takes years sometimes to bring people to a level that is going to carry your organisation into the future. And that doesn't matter whether you're a small startup or a large company. It's probably even harder if you're a large company because you have that massive sort of, Titanic ship to move around. But you need to be already thinking, what are the skills I'm going to be needing in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, and how do I start to acquire those? And there raises the other very interesting challenge. There is no crystal ball. Nobody knows what skills are going to actually be needed in the next 5 years. Maybe in the next 12 months, 2 years, yes, but beyond that, no. But we somehow need to get people ready to build those skills, and that means you need to have people with curiosity, with the learning agility. You need to have your systems and processes in place. You need to see learning in an organisation as part of work, not as I sometimes hear on some organisations, even there are platforms around that describe learning as non-productive time. Sorry, rubbish. Learning is not non-productive time. Learning is what's going to help your organisation survive in the future. And to ensure that learning is effective, it should be based on a skills focus.
Yeah. Who are some, or what are some of the verticals that are most challenged by this? You said it's already clear
Yeah.
in some industries.
Yeah, for sure.
It's less clear to others, but in any case, we have to start thinking about it now and acting on it now. But what verticals are most challenged already today?
Well, I would say any that are currently facing significant adjustments in the way their markets are moving forward. For example, aviation, automotive. I think these types of organisations where there will be fundamental shifts in their markets. Whether it's to greener, electric vehicles, for example, or different fuel types, and probably, mining, indefinitely mining, and chemicals is another one. I think that there are already some of the clear indicators that the markets and where the profits are going to come from is not where they come from today. And they need to already be thinking, what does my workforce look like? Not just in terms of numbers and capabilities, not just in terms of automation, but in terms of the skills that people will need to bring those organizations. And I think they're feeling it today. I think if you are an organization that's been heavily focused on, the traditional vehicle model of, fuel, petrol, diesel, whatever, and suddenly you need to transition towards electric vehicle model. You need different people for that, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be clear to the audience right now already that you have dabbled in the skill space quite a bit, but I'm curious to hear the story about how you got into it.
Yeah.
Because it's like everybody picks up on the skill-based organization in their own ways, but not many people are then triggered to actually start doing something with it. So how did you get involved in skill-based initiatives so passionately? Where did it start for you?
Yeah. So I think, as I said before, I think it probably did start many, many years ago, but not called skills, rather called, competencies, capabilities. And I started my my career looking at adult education, particularly in trades and services, where, I was an assessor certifying, for example, those young people who had acquired a trade, certifying them to say, yes, they have acquired the skills that we aimed them to have by the end of this program. And I think that interest in how do we know that someone does have the capability that we expect them to have, assessing them, being able to say, yes, they can do it, was then a natural route for me into talent acquisition, learning, of course, where that really happens. And so then when we came round to this new, and the frustration always was, how do you make this pragmatic? I'm a pragmatist at heart, and one thing that frustrates me like crazy is when the amount of effort and investment in doing something does not match the output. And I really understood that there must be a better way to evaluate people's skills and capabilities. And so when the AI that came available, 5 or 6 or even more years ago, I can remember being in a workshop where we looked at Watson and the potential of using Watson as a something in HR. And I was saying then, this is exciting because we could probably use this to evaluate skills, but it was so far away from reality. And then about 5 years ago, I had a conversation with my colleague in Comp and Ben in DHL, and he was looking for a use case to put some meat behind an interest he has in associating skills with reference jobs in his job architecture. Okay. And from a Comp and Ben perspective, they didn't have that viable use case, but he knew that from learning and talent side, maybe we did, and we got into a discussion about it. And I said, yeah, I definitely have use cases, but the effort. And we started then looking into some of these, AI-based technologies that were passing the market, pulling in skills, curating and collating and then matching them to your reference jobs. And blew my mind. I was so excited. And that's when I really got on the bandwagon. That's when I said, you know what? let's not over-engineer this thing. Let's just try it out and see how it works. And we did a proof of concept with two things. One, the bringing the skills in and allowing our employees to self-declare skills that they had and skills they'd like to develop, and then the matching algorithms that are out there that allow the matching of skills to development or jobs. And the employees loved it. They just felt so engaged by it. And, you know, it was finally a way that we had to really make that feel personalized to them. So I'm still super interested in the skills in the background, right? I'm like, I love that it engages the employees, and I love that there's that human aspect to this. But actually, what I really love is the data that gives you in your hands as a HR professional to say, how are we going over under supply of skills? What's coming down the pipeline? What are other people looking for? What do we need when you align it with our strategy and direction? You know, and it really gives finally some meat to the bone that we've wanted for many, many years.
Yeah. And you mentioned technology, you mentioned going out in the market, looking for a right fit and how you can be enabled with AI, with new innovation to get that data. Perhaps many HR practitioners would agree if I say that it feels like the HR vendor market is super ambiguous today because you have to cut through a lot of marketing that sounds super similar to each other. How do you look upon the vendor market today? And how did you navigate that in your experience at DHL and perhaps other places too?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, I would position it a little bit along the lines of understand why skills are important to your organization. So I believe everyone needs to start looking at skills today, right? That's something I believe in. But don't do it because you've seen some technology you like the look of, right? Do it because you really understand why skills are important to you. And I can break that down even further. If you are an organization that's only 2,000 people, right? 2,000 people, I don't believe you need to invest, unless you've got lots of money and there's really a valid commercial reason for doing it. I think you can be very pragmatic about how you manage skills for your organization. What you do need is to identify someone to work with to help you get some facts about what skills you might need. So that might be that you need to not acquire a platform, but rather work with a provider who can do that external analysis for you, and you're purchasing the data. And you can, do that on a sort of frequency basis that suits your environment. Or it might mean that you invest in some technology that supports you in that, and then allows you to do some of the market matching in terms of learning and, talent growth and so forth. But it's not the big sort of marketplace that some organizations have. If you're a super large organization, you want to make that investment because you can really save time, money, and effort by allowing the technology to do the hard work, the lifting and pulling. But back to your question, I think the important thing really is to look into the market and not to be distracted by the shiny things, but understand the 4 or 5 key questions that you want to have answered. Will this, and these might be questions, right? Lots of companies will have different questions, but you might have a question like, will this platform provide my, fill in this space function with insights into market directions, the market seeking new skills, for example? Will I be able to see what the market is doing in terms of looking for new skills? Or it might be, will I be able to recommend targeted learning to the individual in order to build the skills and capabilities? Will I be able to reposition people using the technology based on skills? Will I be able to redeploy based on adjacent skills and capabilities? But you need to think about what your organization's strategy is from a people perspective. So in DHL, we had a very strong build focus. So it was very clear to me what we needed was something that was going to support that build. which means I pulled learning deeply into it. I pulled talent visibility deeply into it. Less so talent acquisition. But if you're a buy company, then you might want to bring talent acquisition into it. So then you'd be looking at some of those vendors who are much more in the talent acquisition space than in the marketplace space, for example. So I don't know if I answered your question, but for me,
Yeah,
it's you've got to know what you want before you go and
yeah,
look at that shiny stuff. Because I tell you, if I went looking for a car, and I had limitless money, I would be so wanting a Ferrari, even though I know I absolutely don't need that and probably couldn't fit it into my car parks. Know what you
yeah,
need to buy and buy the right thing.
yeah. So lead by strategy, not by technology.
Yes, yeah.
And don't be distracted.
Yeah.
Remember what is important, and don't buy that Ferrari.
Exactly,
People, don't
exactly.
buy the Ferrari.
Exactly. And we love all those salespeople. I mean, they're lovely people and they've got a job to do, but they have a job to do. So be their
Yeah,
buddy, talk to them, learn from them, but also learn from other places as well. Reach out, listen to podcasts like this, reach out across the network, talk to your colleagues in other companies. Do more than just talk to the salesperson. That would be my
yeah,
advice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think, and that's the whole premise of conversations like these. Let's dive into concrete examples of how you did it in a context where you were accountable for this stuff, right? So let's dive into your story with DHL,
Yeah.
which is still recent, right?
Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
I'm not sure how long it's been since you embarked on your own independent journey, but it's a couple of months, maybe
Oh,
something
not
like that.
even. Yeah, I think
Oh,
as
not
of today,
even.
it's like 3 weeks. So
There we go. So
very
still fresh in the
fresh.
mind. Exactly. And I'm curious to give our audience an understanding on how you got started with it at
Yeah,
DHL. Maybe starting from exactly what you mentioned. If you lead by strategy, not by technology,
yeah,
what was it for DHL? What was
yeah,
the vision?
yeah,
What was the use cases? How did you start?
yeah. So DHL obviously is a very large organisation. It's over 600,000 people in every country in the world. So it's a very large, very complex organisation, highly governed. It's really. Also, with the relationship with Deutsche Post, it's gets a lot of exposure here in Germany as well as around the globe. One of the things that we knew was happening in the market through the analytics we have available to us, I keep still putting myself in there, but they have available to them,
Yeah.
was around this changing nature of work that I mentioned earlier. And it was clear that if we wanted to ensure long-term talent sustainability, that we needed to build our internal market strongly. It was already the biggest market for placing people into jobs. 67% at the time, 67% of jobs internal to DHL were filled by internal people. It was already our biggest market. But given the changes that were coming, we proposed a strategy which was to really double down on this build concept and increase that to something closer to 85% of our roles being placed internally. Also for things like diversity placements and other things, really strengthening this marketplace. We called it a perfect market, that it was liquid fluid, that the supply and demand were balanced, and that we had the skills that were needed, that the internal candidate would always be perceived as the stronger candidate than an external. And there's where the challenge comes, because there's a sort of legacy mindset of, you need fresh blood, you need something to come from outside and, freshen us up. And my argument was, no, you really don't, because a lot of the statistics we had actually highlighted that internal placements were far more successful in the long term than external placements, stayed longer, were better performers, and so on and so forth. So this perfect market concept was what came up. But we didn't know at the time how we were going to make that work. And we actually worked together with a company to produce a click dummy, which I think at the time we called something like Talent Tinder. And that click dummy was presented at a global senior management meeting, and they loved it. And they were asking on the day, can we get it? Can we download it? And I'm like, what, the click dummy? It doesn't work. But it led to us being sort of given the thumbs up to doing a proof of concept with some of the technology, some of those early companies that were out there with tech around like Gloat and Fuel 50 and so forth. They already had marketplaces. But there were about 38 vendors on the market that were offering something called skills. So we went out and evaluated roughly 38 of them, drilled it down to 3 preferred potential partners, and we did a proof of concept with 3. So we took about 100 or 200 team members from across the globe, and we gave each of those 200 a different platform to work with, just for the purpose to see, are we really on the right path here? Is this really something that our company would like and consume and would find value in? At the time, we were really looking at what the quality of the skills were and whether the data coming out would be useful for us in driving towards this perfect market that we were looking for. What we were surprised by was the response from the users in terms of, wow, this is incredible. We want this. In fact, 1 or 2 of them, after we did the evaluation, came forward, and they were using a vanilla platform with no DHL anything, like it was just testing the platform, and they were saying, leave it turned on, we don't care, it's so good, please just let us keep it. Obviously, for the user, it's super important to have that sense of, and it makes sense, in the consumer world, people are using social media or LinkedIn or some of these things every day, and they like it, it's theirs. And I think that was
maybe just to recap and also go a little bit deeper on what you just mentioned. It seems to be 2 sides of the same coin, right? You have on the one hand the business that you need to have on board, on the other hand the end users, the employees that also need to be hyped. And then both of those were true. You've been able to achieve in the first phase, which is important to building momentum. But let's maybe flash back to that moment where you presented that dummy click demo to the senior leaders. That seems like a pivotal moment. Can you go a bit deeper on what exactly you presented and how you took into account who was into the room to decide on the format in which to present, etc.?
So it was all around about the top, I guess about 500 leaders, maybe a few less, but the top layer of, down to sort of EVP or SVP in our organization.
And that's business leaders, right?
Business leaders, and HR and functional leaders, all of them.
Okay.
It's like our regular meeting that DHL has to align the business leaders on strategy and so forth. And the CHRO presented it, and the way that we built that was as though it was on a mobile phone. So it was, obviously it's sort of a video, like it was displayed in the background behind our CHRO. He was pretending that he was on his phone doing it and that it was projected behind him. And it was basically set your skills, like, this is Bob or Craig or whoever it was, this is the picture, and would you like to set your skills? These are some skills you might have. And then he confirmed that. And then the next thing that came up was, here are some what jobs would you like to follow? So, what career path would you like to follow? And he followed a career path. Oh, here's some learning that will help you close your skills gaps. Here's some potential jobs that you might be interested in. And here's the gap between where you are today and what the job requires, and some learning that can help you there. So it was really, and it was visually accurate in terms of our colors, the look, the feel, to the audience who were looking at it. I know why people were asking, can I already download it? Because it looked great. It was a vision for the future. Mm-hmm. They wanted it now, but it meant that it started that real senior positive support for something that we needed for the future. Okay. Rather than waiting till we had it and then saying, do you like it? We were saying, would you like it? And if you want it, then we need your support to implement it. And that was important because you touched on something before. I've always said this project is an upside down project. 5 years, 4.5 years to go from concept to implement full rollout, so 600,000 people on the platform. It was a change project, not a system project. We could not have achieved this without significant effort and investment in change. And why? Because the legacy model of organisations, and DHL is not unique here, is to restrict movement of people internally. They do things like say you have to ask your manager for approval, or you have to follow a probation period if you move to a different part of the business, or there's many things that were blocking internal movement. And we had to unplug all of that before we could open up a marketplace which was fully transparent. Think about that this is a case where individuals in DHL now get jobs recommended to them directly, not via a manager or HR or anything like that, to them. It has an amazing impact that very early on, one of the biggest shifts that was seen was the number of women who were applying for jobs. Because now that they were receiving a job to their desktop, they were going, that must mean I am suitable for this job, rather than looking at and going, maybe I don't match that job, you know? So it was a big change, massive change, alongside a big tech implementation, because it's got, you know, the AI piece. The first time we were really embedding, we had some machine learning previously, but not this sophisticated AI tools that are in these systems. We had to get through the sort of governance and GDPR social partner side of things, which was all new to everyone. And in that phase when, particularly for GDPR, they were, or Europe at least, was, you know, sort of struggling to get their heads around what does the AI governance look like for Europe. So we were trying to build it without knowing what the long-term requirements would be. And I think that's been the beauty of it, is that it's such a rewarding learning phase for everyone that worked on that project. But keeping it agile, keeping it iterative. And you can tell me to be quiet if I'm talking too much, but I get so excited about it because
it's super interesting, and I think it's also impressive because now that you sum up the different parts of the journey, the different hurdles and the things you had to overcome, it seems like it was quite a complex journey at times. And the more complex the journey gets, perhaps the more risk of the business side getting impatient and asking about ROI. Okay, this takes time to develop, we get it, but when will we get results? Like, it's something we often see with our customers, but in the market in general. Can we move faster, please? Because the business is knocking on my door and they want it now, or they want it yesterday, or whatever.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you presented or that you reminded the business of why this is important? And this goes back to where we started at the very beginning, right? It's worth it. Here's why. But how did you communicate that to the business?
And that was multifaceted, and I think that will be different for every organization, and it ties into the change piece, right? Is we really took an iterative implementation approach. So we set up what we called first our trailblazers. And the trailblazers were a couple of thousand people, many from HR as our key stakeholder, who would be the first users of the sort of MVP. And they provided a lot of input around what worked, what didn't work, what they liked, what they didn't like, what change they would need around this implementation phase. So it was iterative in terms of who we rolled it out to, but also what we rolled out. So we didn't wait till we had a full platform. We developed and said, okay, we've got something viable now, let's try it. And we got their feedback, we adjusted it, adapted it, and then we rolled it out to what we called our pioneers. So we had the trailblazers and then we had the pioneers. And the pioneers were like the first few thousand, like, you know, multiple thousands of people who would then be on a productive system. So the pioneers were rather on stage, although they were using real data, they were on stage. And then the pioneers were the first on productive system. And they then would be using it, and we would see how it looked to real users and we would get a lot of feedback from them. We were also using them as influencers on the ground. So we had people on the ground who were proud to be pioneers, who were proud to talk about how good it was, and who were using the system and getting the learning and the jobs. Yeah. And then after the pioneers, we would roll it out to everyone else. And so, this cycle went through about 3 or 4 different phases. So each time with the trailblazers, the pioneers, and then everyone, and then again, and again, and again. And I think that was a really safe and sensible way to do it because, one, it kept momentum. We were able to always go back to the business and say, we've been successful in rolling XYZ out. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it feels like. Here's what your people are saying about it. And we could do that over the years. And then the second one was that we were able to enhance the functionality. So the first time they all went on, there was some minimum functionalities. Maybe some were a little bit disappointed, but then the next time there was more and more and more and more, until now a lot is there, but still more is coming all the time. But it also allowed us to ensure that we understood where we were potentially making missteps and bad decisions. And so we adjusted and adapted on skills. We initially said, we don't want to have visibility for everyone. And then it was clear people wanted their skills to be visible to others because they wanted that, they would receive a friend recommendation or a network recommendation based on skills. So, we were able to make those sort of decisions in the flow and not have to do it, whoa, we've got a big thing. Whoops, we made a mistake and now it's too big to make a significant change.
Yeah. And what was the promised land that you painted for the business? Because I get that iterative approach. You need to show proof to what you're working towards.
Yeah.
Was there any numbers that you put together on, look, this is right now, this is where we can be, and this is how much money it will save us, this is how it will advance us as a business?
Yeah, there were
talk a bit about that case?
Yeah. There was definitely money behind this. But of course, we had a really nice business case, which was based on a number of things. And obviously, I can't share the actual numbers, but the types of KPIs that we were looking at were around the cost of internal placement versus external, a reduction in onboarding costs, an increase in employee engagement, a decrease in actual learning costs for skills attainment, a reduction in time to hire. So there was quite some numbers that we had available to us that proved the concept. Those promises were important, but I think they were even less important than the promise of you will be able to see where the next talent is that you can pull on for any job in your organization. So, one of the biggest pain points for managers is, oh my goodness, if, Meredith leaves, who's going to replace her? Yeah. And that promise that you'll be able to see, and not only will you be able to see, but you'll be able to reach out to them before the job even becomes available so you can get to know them. This sort of idea that you can do what managers love to do, which is to have a network that they then pull on when jobs come open, but make it more, so reduce the bias in it, increase the access to people who traditionally don't have that kind of strong, and I'm going to call it what it is, male network that, many organizations have. Now you bring people into that network who may never have thought about, I can reach out to Julius now and ask him, if he'd like to have a conversation about a job in his company that I'd like to work in one day. And that's amazing. And that, I think, was really the promise that people loved, that idea.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. And then going back to that 5+ journey, were there any traps of losing momentum that you had along the way?
Yes.
And can you talk about those? Because I'm sure, and you just confirmed there were, but just what did they look like and how did you overcome them? And can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, well, the first one was COVID. So I don't need to describe how that looked. But that was a little bit ironic, COVID, because at the beginning it looked like it would be a showstopper for us. Actually, it allowed us to really focus on the foundation and really look at, yes, we need to learn a lot more about the technology. We need to learn a lot more about the change. And yes, we can't be traveling around seeing people and feeling and touching. We're a very employee-centric organisation. DHL is a very employee-centric organisation. So normally we would be out there watching the user use and understanding how they apply it. Now we had to do it differently, online, virtually, and which interestingly gave us more global reach. Because now we could go to anywhere and apply the process rather than, we go to Singapore, we go to London, we go here. We could go to nearly every country. So that was one that was a risk. But the bigger one was at some point we decided on a fundamental design shift. And to get that across the line was really big, because if we had have stuck with the original design, which for various reasons didn't fit the organisation, particularly not our front line, we learned early on through the voice of the user that it wasn't going to work, and had to go back to the board and say, whoop, we now need to do something different. So I think that was one that probably for me was the biggest pain point, because I felt responsible for that, but I also truly believed if we had have gone with that original design, it wouldn't have worked. So we've ended up with is much better. And then the third piece was really with the social partners, where we got a lot of pressure to say don't delay, because of compliance. Okay, not to breach compliance or anything, of course not, but put more effort into getting it done fast, put more effort into getting it done right, but fast. And that probably was even a positive push, because normally we go, well, that's the hard bit. So, but now with that extra pressure, we came up with very creative ways to involve, our partners in legal and our social partners and others to help everyone across the line understanding what challenges we would face with data privacy and GDPR and whatever else in that space. Okay. Yeah.
So if I summarize, the key thing that you were working towards was a better employee experience through a talent marketplace, right?
Yeah.
Where you could find opportunities internally, make it easier to hire internally, etc. I wonder, how would you advise the companies that postpone the employee experience decision and say, look, we want to start with the data first, prove to the business this data has value, and then worry about where we send that to later? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think both are valid ways of going. I think it heavily depends on the organisation itself and what sort of data they already have. Because in the end, one of the reasons that we needed to get our employees onto the system sooner rather than later is because we just didn't have the historic data that was required to do those proof cases, right? So we needed to get the employee skills into the platform. We needed to get their history, their interests, their preferences. We had to get all of that in place in order to ensure that the data was valuable. I think, and there will be companies like this. I know for a fact that McKinsey, for example, has a really good use case based on the data that they have available, because they already had that available to them, and allocating skills and contracts and projects and everything was a really nice proof case based on data first. And I don't know what the user experience is on their side, but I do know that it seemed to me, at least in the presentation I saw, that they had the data first. So I think it depends on your organisation. If you have the data, it definitely puts you in a comfortable place when it comes to saying, this is what you can expect, here's where we are today, and we can even enhance it more. So let's get on with that journey. Wasn't an option for us at that point. So I think both work, but it's what your starting point is, and that's something to, again, goes back to your strategy and everything. Know your business first and then decide your path. Don't just go with tech first.
Yeah, exactly. And what is beyond the use case of talent mobility? Because that was a clear one at DHL.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a lot you can do with skills.
Yeah.
One of it is reducing dependency on external hires, increasing internal hires. Were there any other ideas that came from the business or from HR
Yeah.
on what we can do more with this data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I mean, yeah, as you say, the obvious ones are talent mobility, also learning, really targeting and making learning more intentional and efficient. But there's also things around, it's sort of peripheral to talent mobility. It's around that, redeployment, preparation for skills availability in the future. I think there's a nice one also around gigs and assignments and project management. So really finding the demand. And I heard a lovely, it's not implemented in DHL, but I love this so much, this idea of micro support. So, those moments of support where you as a team member need someone to support you on, let's say I'm recruiting a cloud engineer and I'm not a tech recruiter. If I can find someone that has an hour or 2 hours to spare with me, either to do the interview or to coach me around what to look for, that's super important. And I think those types of things are all enabled with skills. In addition, I could imagine, and now we get a bit, but I could imagine if you could expand that out into also understanding something about your customer skills bases and so forth, where they're heading with skills, so that if they're heading into that direction, then we need to start to develop our products in that direction. So you can sort of commercialize that alignment between your product offer or your if you're in manufacturing, I guess what you're developing, your R&D and whatever, and what the customers and the markets are doing. So I think there's a lot actually that the skills conversation can pick up on in the social responsibility space or in the ESG space, in the communities in which you operate, ensuring that skilling is available for those groups, maybe underprivileged groups or maybe just groups with limited access, who need skills in order just to live in today's world, like PC skills, and also beautiful initiatives around engaging, mature workforces and so forth that expands the target market that you might be recruiting out of, simply by offering skills development. You can, oh my God, I could go on and on and on. There's so many opportunities that come from skills that are not even HR related opportunities, but are really business opportunities.
Exactly. And that's the point. That's the point we need to communicate. That
Definitely.
it goes way beyond being just an HR gimmick, right?
Right.
And I think your responses here will also really interest Josh Starr, who asked in the first conversation we had, what are some of the use cases with skills that no one is thinking about right now?
Yeah, right.
I think some of the dream cases you mentioned definitely cover that question too.
Good.
As you also mentioned some other companies, you mentioned McKinsey. I wondered, during your time doing skills at DHL, what were some other companies that you looked up to that were also quite advanced in this and that you learned from, which might point our audience to places where they could learn more, they could, besides the DHL example, other companies that you looked up to? I'm curious.
Yeah. I've learned so much from so many people everywhere, but the first company that helped us a lot was Schneider Electric. So they were, I pay it forward now because of what Schneider Electric did for us, helping us learn in the early stages. I know Nestle and Roche and a couple of others. I think Bosch also are doing some good stuff. Nestle also is one that, we've really shared a lot between each other. Cornerstone has supported us a lot. There's really been some willingness in the community to share openly, knowing that nobody yet has the answer, and it is better for everyone if we all learn from each other. I'm probably missing some really good ones as well, but those are the ones that immediately come to mind for me.
Awesome. And then maybe to close off, as we do, I want you to ask a question to our next guest, and it can be really anything. It can be skill related. It can be related to something else you're curious about. Just keep in mind that the people on this podcast are usually skill practitioners, are doing stuff with skills or have done in the past.
Yeah.
And so feel free to ask them anything and to expand on the question a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So my question is actually a real one for me. That as you know, we focused first on the user experience, but with an eye on the data and what we will have available to HR and others in terms of skills analytics. But my question really is, what will be the most powerful decisions that will be able to be made using this skills data in the future? So what's really going to make the difference for organizations once we have this, very transparent skills data within our organizations?
Okay, let's see how they roll with that. And I'll make sure I'll get the answer to you
Thank you.
when they do. But it was a great conversation, Meredith. Thank you so much for your
Thanks,
insights
Julius. Yeah,
and your
so.
time. And I hope we speak more in the future.
Of course we will. Of course we will. Thank you.